What if the reason you still do not have what you want is not because you have failed to believe hard enough, but because you have been taught a beautiful lie? A lie that sounds comforting. A lie that sells journals, courses, affirmations, and endless motivation. A lie that tells you that if you just think positively, picture your ideal life clearly enough, and keep telling yourself that abundance is coming, the world will eventually surrender to your desire. But real life does not work that way. Society rewards visible confidence, polished language, and performance. It often applauds people who look certain long before it rewards people who are actually prepared. And if you are not careful, you start mistaking emotional excitement for movement. You start confusing mental rehearsal with real transformation. In this video, we are going to strip that illusion down to the bone. We are going to talk about why wanting is not enough, why clarity matters more than fantasy, why disciplined action beats emotional intensity, and why true surrender only begins after you have done everything within your control. And stay with me, because near the end I want to share one of the biggest mistakes people make when they say they are letting go. Most are not letting go at all. They are quietly avoiding the hard part and calling it peace. Welcome to StoicCraft. If you are tired of shallow motivation, if you want a deeper kind of strength, and if you are ready to stop performing hope and start building results, this conversation is for you. We are living in an age that is obsessed with appearances. People broadcast certainty while privately falling apart. They post confidence before they have character. They market outcomes they have not earned. And in a culture like this, it becomes very easy to believe that reality can be manipulated through mood alone. Smile more. Think higher. Speak it into existence. Manifest harder. That language is seductive because it protects the ego from a harder truth. Life responds less to fantasy than to structure, less to wishing than to disciplined contact with reality. That does not mean optimism is useless. It means optimism is incomplete. Hope can start a fire, but it cannot steer the fire. Desire can wake you up, but it cannot carry you across the distance. The Stoics understood something many modern people do not want to hear. Your life changes when your judgments become clearer, your choices become cleaner, and your actions become more consistent. Not when your emotions become more dramatic. So here is the path we are going to walk through together. First, we will confront the difference between desire and directed effort. Then we will talk about clarity, because most people are exhausted not only from working hard, but from working in 10 directions at once. After that, we will look at disciplined action, the illusion of positive thinking, the limits of journaling and affirmation, the role of struggle, the meaning of surrender, and the difference between building a life of substance and chasing a life of display. And at the end, we will bring it all together into one simple but demanding truth: transformation belongs to the person who acts clearly, waits patiently, adapts honestly, and refuses to hand over their agency. Part 1: Desire is not direction. Think about a goal that once consumed you. Maybe it was a promotion. Maybe it was a relationship. Maybe it was the desire to finally make enough money to feel safe. Maybe it was something quieter, more private, the wish to wake up without dread, to stop feeling behind, to stop carrying the invisible shame of wasted years. You thought about it constantly. You imagined what your life would feel like if it happened. You told yourself that once you reached it, everything would settle. You would finally breathe. And maybe you did everything modern culture told you to do. You wrote it down. You visualized it. You repeated phrases that sounded powerful. You organized your thoughts into neat little promises. On paper, it looked like devotion. From the inside, it felt like commitment. But in reality, something was missing. You were moving intensely in your mind while your life remained strangely still. That gap is painful because it is confusing. When you want something badly, you assume that the intensity of your desire must mean something. You assume that the emotional weight of the dream should somehow bend reality. But desire by itself is just energy. Energy is not the same as direction. Fire can warm a house or burn it down. Water can irrigate a field or flood it. Human longing is no different. Without structure, longing becomes emotional smoke. It fills the mind. It creates urgency. It makes you feel alive for a moment. But it does not necessarily move you toward anything. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. That insight matters because it shifts the focus from fantasy to friction. The path does not appear because you want the destination. The path appears when you meet resistance and turn it into instruction. You find out what matters when reality pushes back. You find out whether your desire has any backbone when your feelings no longer carry you. This is where a harder, more Machiavellian truth about society enters the picture. The world is full of people who know how to dramatize wanting. They know how to talk about their dreams, how to present themselves as visionary, how to create an aura of momentum. But when pressure arrives, most retreat into explanation. They become poets of intention and beggars of execution. Society often rewards this performance longer than it should. That can make you feel as if you are losing because you are not seen yet. But visibility is not victory. Noise is not movement. Public excitement is not preparation. That is why so many people spend years feeling spiritually busy while materially unchanged. They are not lazy in the obvious sense. They are emotionally occupied, mentally crowded, internally rehearsing. But they are not taking the small, often humiliating steps that reality actually responds to. Sending the email, making the call, learning the boring skill, cutting the expense, having the difficult conversation, accepting that they are not confused, only resistant. Epictetus reminds us that we are disturbed not by events, but by our judgments about them. One of the most destructive judgments a person can make is to confuse desire with readiness. Wanting something deeply does not mean you are prepared to build it. Longing for a better life is not the same as having the structure to sustain that life. This is not an insult. It is liberating. Because once you stop worshipping desire, you can begin training direction. And that is the first turn in this entire conversation. Stop asking whether you want it badly enough. Ask whether your life is organized in a way that can actually receive it. The promotion, the peace, the marriage, the recovery, the freedom, the success. If it arrived tomorrow, would your habits support it? Would your schedule hold it? Would your character protect it? Would your nervous system even know what to do with it? These are not cynical questions. They are honest ones. And honesty is where real change begins. Part 2. Clarity is the compass most people never build. Once you see that desire is not enough, the next question becomes obvious. What is missing? In many cases, the answer is clarity. Not the vague kind people talk about in self-help language. Not knowing your dreams. I mean the kind of clarity that cuts through emotional fog and tells you, with almost uncomfortable precision, what matters, what does not, and what must happen next. A lot of people are not failing because they are incapable. They are failing because their attention is scattered across too many identities, too many impulses, too many borrowed goals. One day they want freedom. The next day they want approval. Then money. Then rest. Then reinvention. Then revenge disguised as ambition. Then healing. but only if healing does not require loss. They call it being multifaceted. Often it is just fragmentation. If you have ever felt exhausted without being able to point to one clear reason, this may be why. The human mind can survive difficulty. What it struggles with is internal contradiction. When your values are unclear, every decision drains you. Every choice feels heavier than it should. You start 10 things and complete none. You keep reflecting, but never arrive at conviction. You confuse complexity with depth because admitting the simpler truth would force commitment. The Stoics prized clarity because they understood that life punishes confusion with drift. If you do not decide what is essential, the world will decide for you. And the world rarely decides in your favor. It will fill your attention with manufactured urgency. It will tempt you to chase the symbols of success instead of the substance of it. It will invite you into social theater, where people compete for status through display rather than through mastery. And if you are even a little emotionally hungry, it becomes easy to mistake borrowed desire for your own calling. This is why clarity is not just productivity advice. It is moral protection. It protects you from being manipulated by the moods of the crowd. It protects you from mistaking envy for purpose. It protects you from chasing what looks impressive but leaves you hollow. Seneca understood this well. A person who does not know which harbor they are sailing toward will never find a favorable wind. That is not merely poetic. It is brutally practical. So what does clarity actually look like in real life? It looks like identifying what this season of your life is truly about. Not what used to matter. Not what impresses other people. Not what would make your old wounds feel avenged. What matters now? Maybe your life right now is about rebuilding trust in yourself. Maybe it is about becoming financially stable after years of chaos. Maybe it is about strengthening your marriage instead of quietly escaping into fantasy. Maybe it is about learning to do one thing well instead of starting over every 3 months because discomfort convinces you that destiny has shifted. Clarity also requires naming the hidden motives underneath your goals. Do you want money because you value freedom, or because you are tired of feeling invisible? Do you want influence because you genuinely have something to contribute, or because you need admiration to feel real? Do you want peace, or do you just want life to stop confronting the parts of you that still need to mature? These questions matter because a goal rooted in vanity behaves differently from a goal rooted in value. The first one consumes you. The second one organizes you. When clarity arrives, something quiet but powerful happens. Energy stops leaking. You become less dramatic and more precise. You say no more easily. You stop needing every opportunity. You stop chasing every conversation. You stop mistaking motion for progress. In a strange way, your life begins to look less exciting from the outside and more effective from the inside. This is one reason true progress is often invisible at first. Society celebrates visible activity. Meetings, branding, announcements, reinventions. But most meaningful change begins privately. In the decision to simplify. In the discipline to cut what is not aligned. In the honesty to admit that half your exhaustion came from trying to carry goals that never belonged to you. Clarity is not loud. It does not flatter the ego. It removes options, and that is precisely why it creates strength. If your life feels stuck, do not begin by asking for more motivation. Begin by asking for sharper definition. What exactly are you trying to build? Why does it matter? What value does it serve beyond your immediate feelings? What are you willing to sacrifice for it? What are you no longer willing to pretend about? Clarity is the first mercy reality gives to the serious person. It does not make the road shorter, but it does stop you from wandering in circles. Part 3. Action is the bridge between the inner world and reality. Clarity without action becomes another elegant prison. You can understand yourself deeply and still remain unchanged. You can explain your patterns, name your wounds, map your ambitions, and still go to sleep in the same life year after year. That is why disciplined action matters so much. It is the bridge between insight and incarnation, between what you know and what your life eventually becomes. One of the quiet tragedies of adulthood is how easy it is to look active while avoiding the action that counts. You can research for months. You can organize systems. You can redesign plans. You can talk endlessly about timing, alignment, energy, and readiness. But eventually reality asks only one question: what did you do? Not what did you feel? Not what did you intend? Not what would you have done in a better season? What did you do with the hour you actually had? With the opportunity you actually touched? With the discomfort you actually faced? The Stoics had no patience for the fantasy that thought alone could substitute for conduct. Virtue, in their view, lived in action. Not grand gestures, but repeated ones. The call made when you are nervous. The practice session when nobody is watching. The apology when pride would rather stay silent. The refusal to retaliate just because ego is wounded. The willingness to prepare in obscurity while other people perform confidence in public. This is where people often misunderstand momentum. They think momentum is a feeling. It is not. Momentum is the cumulative consequence of repeated, directed action. Most of the time it does not feel dramatic. It feels inconvenient, repetitive, unrewarded. You do not always sense a breakthrough while you are building one. Water does not look powerful as it drips. But given time, it reshapes stone. Consider how this plays out in ordinary modern life. A man says he wants a better career, yet he spends each night numbing himself because the thought of starting small bruises his pride. A woman says she wants peace, yet she checks the message thread that destabilizes her 10 times a day and calls it seeking closure. A creator says he wants reach, but he avoids studying his audience because part of him would rather preserve the fantasy of hidden genius than confront the craft required for relevance. These are not failures of desire. They are failures of disciplined contact with reality. And reality is rarely sentimental. This is where a colder social truth must be faced. The world often rewards competence before it rewards sincerity. It is not always fair. It is not always noble. But it is often true. Good intentions do not automatically produce results. Quiet dreams are not owed public recognition. The market, the institution, the audience, the opportunity, the relationship, none of them care about your inner monologue as much as you do. They respond to value, timing, coherence, usefulness, steadiness. Once you accept that, you stop taking the world's delay as a personal insult and start treating it as feedback. Disciplined action also requires humility. You must be willing to look unimpressive while you learn. To be a beginner without making it a moral drama. To take steps that do not flatter your self-image. This is where many people break. They are willing to desire the outcome, but not to survive the ordinariness of the process. They want the life, but not the apprenticeship. They want to be chosen without becoming trustworthy. They want the room to open without building the skill that lets them stay in it. That is why action must be both deliberate and measured. Random busyness is not strength. It is often just anxiety in motion. The right action is aligned action. It answers the reality of the goal. It is small enough to repeat, clear enough to evaluate, and honest enough to refine. Did the effort move the needle? What resistance appeared? What needs to change? Action without reflection becomes waste. Reflection without action becomes theater. The two must stay married. If you want to know whether a person is truly changing, do not ask what they have realized. Ask what they repeat. Ask what their days now contain that they once avoided. Ask what they no longer negotiate with themselves about. That is where transformation hides, in the repeated deed, not the emotional revelation. In the hour protected. In the boundary enforced. In the craft practiced. In the temptation declined. In the one next step taken again tomorrow. Part 4. Why positive thinking feels powerful but often changes nothing. Positive thinking is attractive because it gives immediate emotional relief. It lets you feel aligned without first being transformed. It can calm panic, soften despair, and keep you from collapsing into cynicism. There is value in that. But there is also danger. Because the mind can experience hope as if it were progress. And that feeling can become addictive. You know this if you have ever left a motivational video feeling renewed, only to find that by evening nothing in your actual behavior had changed. You were not lying to yourself exactly. You were just experiencing borrowed energy. A temporary lift. An emotional advance on a life you had not yet built. Modern culture sells this sensation constantly because it is profitable. It is easier to market inspiration than discipline. Easier to sell belief than structure. Easier to tell people they are one mindset shift away from everything they want than to tell them that change often begins with embarrassment, repetition, and a long season of invisible effort. Carl Jung warned that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That observation cuts straight through the self-help illusion. You can repeat, "I am successful," all day, but if your unconscious still associates visibility with danger, responsibility with overwhelm, wealth with guilt, and commitment with loss of freedom, your life will quietly obey those deeper patterns. Positive language can float on top of unexamined resistance for years. This is why people sometimes become more frustrated after periods of heavy affirmation. They expected the emotional ritual to produce external motion. When it did not, they concluded that something must be wrong with them. Maybe they did not believe hard enough. Maybe their energy was off. Maybe they sabotaged the universe. In truth, they may simply have mistaken internal encouragement for external execution. Stoicism offers a corrective here. It does not despise positive thought, but it refuses to worship it. The Stoic asks, what part of this situation is within my control, and what concrete response is now required? That question grounds the mind. It interrupts fantasy. It makes hope earn its keep. Optimism becomes useful only when it strengthens action, not when it replaces it. There is another reason positive thinking can mislead us. It can become a shield against grief, anger, and reality testing. Some people stay positive because they are terrified of facing what is actually broken. They call it faith, but often it is avoidance in clean clothes. They keep speaking about blessings while their finances are disorganized, their relationships are deteriorating, or their health is asking for serious attention. In that state, positivity becomes a kind of emotional censorship. It does not heal pain. It postpones the confrontation that healing requires. This is where the social performance of optimism becomes especially dangerous. In a culture addicted to appearances, people learn that sounding hopeful is more acceptable than sounding honest. So they speak in polished language while privately drowning. They say they are trusting the process when what they are really doing is refusing to admit that the current strategy is not working. This is not peace. It is image management. Healthy optimism is different. Healthy optimism says, this is hard, but I can still act. This hurts, but I do not need to collapse. I do not know the outcome, but I know my next responsibility. That kind of hope is not sentimental. It is disciplined. It is married to effort. It accepts uncertainty without surrendering agency. So yes, speak to yourself with strength. Refuse despair. Guard your mind against bitterness. But do not ask positive thought to do the labor of action. Let it fuel you. Let it steady you. Let it keep you from becoming cynical. But then move. Study. Practice. Adapt. Repair. Reach out. Build. The mind can light the torch. It still has to carry it. Part 5. Writing it down is not the same as living it out. There is something powerful about writing. A thought that lives only in the mind is unstable. It drifts. It mutates. It disappears. When you write, you arrest the thought. You pin it to the page long enough to examine it. That is why journaling, planning, and written reflection can be genuinely valuable. They create visibility. They expose contradiction. They help you revisit what you actually said you cared about. But writing has a limit, and many people quietly build their whole lives inside that limit. They document desire instead of directing behavior. They create pages full of intention and then wonder why reality has not moved. The notebook becomes a museum of private sincerity. Beautiful entries. Honest promises. Emotional clarity. Very little changed conduct. You see this everywhere. People have lists of goals, lists of habits, lists of values, lists of manifestations, lists of future selves. Their pages are full of language that sounds mature and intentional. But when the page closes, the old rhythm returns. The same delay. The same distractions. The same excuses that have simply learned to speak in more enlightened language. The Stoics would never dismiss reflection, but they would insist that the point of reflection is alignment. Epictetus, with his emphasis on rational choice, directs us back to conduct again and again. What use is a noble entry if the next action still bows to fear? What use is the perfect morning affirmation if the first difficult task is still avoided by noon? What use is insight if it never enters the nervous system through repetition? Think of writing as a map. A map matters. It prevents confusion. It can save time. It can reveal terrain you had not noticed. But nobody reaches the destination by admiring the map. The road still has to be walked. The body still has to move. The feet still have to accept friction. This is where many intelligent people get trapped. Because writing feels productive, especially when it produces emotional relief. You can leave a journaling session feeling clearer, lighter, more in touch with yourself. That has value. But clarity is only the beginning of responsibility, not its completion. This is why every written goal should contain a next physical step. Not a vague dream. Not a mood. A step. If you write, "I want to become financially secure," the page should force you into embodiment. What budget will you review? What expense will you cut? What skill will you learn? What conversation will you have? If you write, "I want to heal this relationship," what behavior changes today? What defensiveness gets interrupted? What apology gets spoken? If you write, "I want to respect myself more," where does that show up by sunset? Writing also becomes more powerful when it is used diagnostically, not ceremonially. Revisit your entries and ask different questions. What patterns keep repeating? What promises do you make when emotional and abandon when uncomfortable? What themes reveal your actual values? What goals keep surviving across seasons, and which ones disappear as soon as they stop flattering your ego? This is where journaling turns from decoration into feedback. Seneca warned that life is not short, we waste much of it. Writing can become one of those wastes if it stays disconnected from embodied effort. But when joined to action, it becomes a powerful tool. A place to sharpen your judgments. To record what worked. To observe resistance. To refine your approach. To externalize priorities so your attention stops scattering. There is also something deeply human about this practice when done well. The page becomes a witness, not a stage. Not a place where you try to sound wise, but a place where you become honest enough to see yourself clearly. And from that honesty, smaller and more durable actions emerge. Not declarations built for performance. Decisions built for repetition. So write. Absolutely write. Capture the idea. Name the fear. Clarify the goal. But do not confuse inscription with transformation. The pen does not create the life. The hand, guided by reason, disciplined through action, and corrected by reality, that is what creates the life. Part 6. Struggle is not proof you are on the wrong path. One of the most discouraging myths people carry is this: if something is truly meant for me, it should unfold smoothly. It should feel aligned, almost fated. The right relationship will be easy. The right work will feel natural. The right path will produce less resistance, not more. That belief sounds comforting, but it collapses under the weight of adult life. Anything meaningful will test you. Not because the universe is cruel, but because reality has weight. Anything worth carrying asks something from the one who would carry it. A worthwhile marriage asks for patience, restraint, courage, and accountability. Serious work asks for monotony, repetition, delayed gratification, and the ability to continue when applause is absent. Healing asks for grief. Leadership asks for loneliness. Freedom asks for self-command. There is no depth without friction. This matters because people often interpret resistance emotionally instead of intelligently. The moment the process becomes difficult, they assume it must be wrong. But often the opposite is true. Resistance may be the first sign that you have finally touched something real. Something heavier than fantasy. Something that cannot be possessed through mood alone. Look at any craft. The athlete is shaped by strain. The musician by repetition. The writer by terrible drafts. The entrepreneur by uncertainty and rejection. The parent by sacrifice. The one thing all serious pursuits have in common is this: they expose your weakness before they reward your effort. That is not punishment. It is revelation. Epictetus reminds us again that external events do not harm us in themselves, our judgment about them creates distress. If struggle is immediately judged as failure, then every obstacle becomes a threat to identity. But if struggle is understood as information, training, and proof of engagement, then the mind steadies. You stop treating difficulty as betrayal and start treating it as education. There is also an important social dimension here. The world often glamorizes outcomes and hides the brutal middle. People showcase the promotion, not the years of anonymous competence. They post the wedding, not the long work of becoming someone capable of intimacy. They market the success story, not the seasons where nothing made sense. This creates a false baseline. You compare your raw process to someone else's edited conclusion and decide you must be failing. But you are not behind. You are simply in the part no one advertises. And yes, there is a more Machiavellian layer to this too. Society is not only fake in a shallow social media sense. It often trains people to value image over substance, speed over maturity, signals over foundations. In such an environment, struggle can make you feel inferior because it is less photogenic than performance. Yet the people who survive and build durable lives are very often the ones who endured the unglamorous difficulty that others learned to conceal. They did not just learn how to look capable. They became capable. Struggle also clarifies desire. Many goals feel attractive when they are abstract. Fewer remain attractive when they become costly. This is not a failure. It is refinement. Resistance separates the borrowed wish from the rooted commitment. If you leave every path the moment it stops flattering your mood, you may spend your entire life calling yourself open while never actually becoming strong. Seneca observed that difficulty strengthens the mind as labor does the body. That is not motivational fluff. It is a law of formation. The capacity you want often arrives disguised as the burden you did not want. Patience is formed by delay. Discipline by repetition. Courage by exposure to fear. Discernment by making some wrong moves and then choosing not to lie about them. So when you meet resistance, do not rush to ask, "Why is this happening to me?" Ask, "What is this revealing? What part of me is this trying to train? What skill, boundary, mindset, or weakness is being exposed here?" Those questions preserve agency. They convert pain into instruction. They keep you from drowning in self-pity or fleeing into fantasy. Meaningful lives are not built by those who never struggle. They are built by those who learn how to relate to struggle without romanticizing it or collapsing beneath it. You do not need to love the hard part. You only need to stop misreading it. Part 7. Surrender is not quitting, it is letting go after full effort. Few ideas are more misunderstood than surrender. People hear, "let go," and imagine passivity. Stop trying. Stop caring. Trust the universe. Relax and wait. But that is not surrender. That is often emotional retreat disguised as spiritual maturity. True surrender comes at the end of exertion, not in place of it. You cannot meaningfully release what you have never fully carried. You cannot honestly let go of the outcome if you have not first honored your responsibility to the process. Otherwise, what you call surrender is frequently just relief that you no longer have to face the uncomfortable demands of disciplined effort. The Stoic version of surrender is much harder and much cleaner. It begins with a ruthless understanding of what is and is not within your control. Your choices, your responses, your preparation, your work ethic, your honesty, your consistency, those belong to you. The timing, the reaction of others, the market, the final outcome, the hidden variables, those do not. Wisdom lies in exhausting the first category while refusing to be psychologically owned by the second. This is where many people secretly live in contradiction. They want the peace of detachment without paying the price of full engagement. They want to feel spiritually elevated above outcomes, but they have not truly risked themselves in the process. They have not made the call. They have not completed the training. They have not committed to the repetition. They have not applied the knowledge long enough for reality to answer back. Yet they say they are releasing attachment. In many cases, what they are releasing is accountability. Real surrender feels different. It feels like this: I did what was mine to do. I prepared. I acted. I corrected. I stayed longer than comfort wanted. I learned what I could. I showed up in good faith. And now, because I know I have met my responsibility, I do not need to destroy myself trying to control what was never mine. There is dignity in that kind of surrender. It quiets anxiety without killing initiative. It allows you to rest without becoming passive. It keeps the mind clear enough to notice new openings. In fact, many people only become perceptive again once obsession loosens its grip. When you are clutching an outcome too tightly, your field of vision narrows. You stop seeing alternatives. You stop recognizing unexpected routes. You mistake one particular result for the whole of possibility. Marcus Aurelius said that you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That strength is not theatrical calm. It is disciplined proportion. It knows how to work hard without turning the outcome into a referendum on self-worth. It knows how to stay available to life without trying to dominate every variable. It knows that effort is an obligation, results are a consequence. There is also a profound emotional mercy in proper surrender. Many adults are exhausted not only because life is hard, but because they are trying to emotionally micromanage reality. They relive every interaction, overread every delay, interpret every silence, and make the nervous system a prisoner of outcomes that have not yet arrived. Surrender breaks that cycle. Not by pretending not to care, but by restoring the boundary between responsibility and obsession. This kind of detachment is especially powerful in relationships, work, and long-term pursuits. You can love deeply without controlling another person's response. You can build seriously without demanding instant payoff. You can take the shot without deciding your identity based on whether it lands. That is freedom. Not indifference. Freedom. And paradoxically, this is often when attraction becomes possible in a healthier sense. Not because the universe rewards emotional detachment like magic, but because people and opportunities respond differently to someone who is grounded, self-contained, and not radiating desperation. Desperation repels. Composure clarifies. When you are no longer chasing from panic, you choose better, speak better, and act from a steadier center. In that sense, letting go does attract, but only because it changes the quality of the one doing the attracting. So relax, yes. Let go, yes. But do it honestly. Do it after full effort. Do it after clear action. Do it once you have honored your side of the equation. Then release what was never yours to command and keep walking. Part 8. If you build your life around appearances, even success will feel empty. At some point every serious person has to confront a devastating possibility. What if the thing I have been chasing is not actually the thing I need? What if the image of success I inherited is too shallow to sustain a human life? This matters because many people say they want abundance, but what they really want is relief from humiliation. They want proof that they matter. They want protection from the judgment of others. They want to feel safe in a world where status can seem like armor. None of that makes them weak. It makes them human. But if these motives remain unexamined, they can quietly turn life into an endless pursuit of symbols. The Stoics repeatedly bring us back to value because value stabilizes ambition. Wealth, reputation, recognition, influence. None of these are evil. But they are unstable masters. If your inner life is built on them, you will remain vulnerable to every fluctuation in public response. One bad season and your identity starts to crack. One comparison and your peace evaporates. One social slight and your whole nervous system goes to war. Marcus Aurelius understood that the disciplined mind creates the foundation for contentment, not the applause of the crowd. This is especially relevant now because modern life monetizes insecurity. Entire systems profit from making you feel insufficient. They sell status as salvation. They tell you that if you acquire enough, display enough, or rise enough, the hunger will stop. But hunger rooted in misalignment does not end through accumulation. It only gets better dressed. A more Machiavellian reading of society sees this clearly. Many institutions do not care whether you are fulfilled. They care whether you remain engaged in the chase. Whether you keep consuming, competing, comparing, and performing. A person anchored in values is harder to manipulate. A person who knows what enough means is dangerous to systems built on endless appetite. That is one reason inner mastery matters so much. It is not only spiritual. It is strategic. Fulfillment tends to emerge from three quieter sources: competence, contribution, and connection. Competence gives you self-respect because you have touched reality and improved your ability to meet it. Contribution gives meaning because your life is no longer orbiting only around your own cravings. Connection gives depth because no amount of status can replace being known, trusted, and able to love without performance. When your goals align with these deeper values, something changes in the quality of your effort. You stop chasing outcomes solely for display. You begin building capacities. You care more about becoming the kind of person who can generate value consistently than about securing one flashy moment of validation. This makes your ambition calmer and stronger at the same time. It also changes how you relate to money and success. Instead of treating material gain as the definition of victory, you begin to treat it as one possible byproduct of disciplined, value-driven engagement. That shift protects you from two extremes: worshipping wealth and demonizing it. You can pursue it intelligently without asking it to heal wounds it was never designed to heal. Relationships deepen under this framework too. When your life is overly organized around appearances, even intimacy becomes performative. You choose people who fit the image. You say the right things. You manage perception. But when values anchor you, relationships become places of genuine mutual strengthening. Aristotle saw friendship as an expression of virtue, and there is wisdom in that. The people around you either train your character or erode it. They either reinforce your deepest values or invite you into more polished forms of self-betrayal. This is why manifestation, properly understood, cannot just mean getting things. It must mean becoming coherent. Becoming a person whose thoughts, choices, values, and actions no longer pull in opposite directions. A person who is not cheaply seduced by symbols. A person who can build, enjoy, contribute, and rest without turning life into an endless audition. If the life you are chasing would still leave you empty, then no amount of attracting will save you. But if your pursuit is rooted in character, usefulness, discipline, love, and integrity, then even the slower seasons carry meaning. Because you are not only trying to win. You are trying to become someone real. Part 9: Time, Reflection, and the Slow Alchemy of a Changed Life. One of the hardest truths to accept is that transformation is usually quiet. There is rarely a dramatic day when everything becomes different forever. More often there are long stretches where nothing feels impressive at all. You choose better in small ways. You recover faster from old spirals. You stop sending the message you used to send. You protect the morning. You study a little longer. You tell the truth a little sooner. You keep your word a little more often. And because these changes are not cinematic, the ego is tempted to dismiss them. But this is how lives are actually rebuilt. Through repetition. Through course correction. Through patient contact with reality. The spectacular breakthrough, when it comes, is often just the visible surface of 1,000 quiet choices nobody clapped for. This is why time matters so much. Not as an excuse for passivity, but as a medium of formation. Some things simply cannot be rushed. Trust, skill, physical recovery, emotional regulation, financial stability, deep work. These are not products of a weekend of inspiration. They are outcomes of sustained alignment. Seneca warned against haste for a reason. Haste often arises from ego's inability to endure the ordinary pace of real growth. Reflection plays a crucial role here because action alone is not enough. If you keep repeating the wrong approach, consistency becomes self-sabotage. Reflection allows you to ask, what is working? What keeps failing? Where am I still lying to myself? Where have I improved but refused to acknowledge it because it does not look dramatic enough? Where am I attached to one outcome so tightly that I cannot see a wiser route? Plato, Jung, Aristotle, their language differs, but each in his own way points toward the necessity of integrating thought and lived experience. Wisdom is not abstraction. It is tested understanding. It is what remains after your theories have been forced to negotiate with reality. That is why reflection cannot just be sentimental review. It must be honest evaluation. Where did I act with integrity? Where did fear disguise itself as caution? Where did impatience make me reckless? Where did pride keep me from learning? There is something deeply strengthening about this process. Instead of needing your life to constantly reassure you, you begin learning how to read it. Setbacks become data. Delays become perspective. Success becomes information rather than intoxication. The mind grows less theatrical, more durable, more discerning. You stop needing every season to look impressive. You care more that it is building something true. This is also when confidence becomes real. Not the loud kind, not the curated kind, not the fragile kind that needs immediate results. Real confidence is born from evidence. You kept going. You adapted. You survived what once overwhelmed you. You became less easily manipulated by moods, by crowds, by panic, by shame. You know yourself a little better now. You know what you tend to do under pressure. You know what stabilizes you. You know what destroys your clarity. That kind of self-knowledge is quietly powerful. And perhaps most importantly, slow transformation teaches you reverence for process. You stop despising the daily. You realize the daily is where your life actually happens. Not in the fantasy version. Not in the future montage. In the repeated hour. In the morning decision. In the response to frustration. In the integrity of what you do when nothing glamorous is happening. This is one reason mature peace feels different from youthful excitement. Excitement wants quick evidence. Peace is willing to build slowly. Excitement says, show me now. Peace says, I know what I am doing, and I can continue. Excitement chases certainty. Peace practices steadiness. If you have been waiting for some giant external confirmation that you are finally on the right path, you may miss the real miracle entirely. Your judgments are cleaner now. Your reactions are less chaotic. Your standards are stronger. Your boundaries are clearer. Your desire is less frantic. Your action is more consistent. Your need for immediate validation is weakening. That is not nothing. That is the architecture of a changed life being laid brick by brick. So let us gather the threads. Wanting is not enough. Desire can wake you up, but it cannot organize your life. If you mistake emotional intensity for readiness, you will keep feeling busy while staying in the same place. Clarity matters because scattered desire creates scattered effort. When you know what matters, why it matters, and what must happen next, your energy stops leaking into every distraction that begs for your attention. Action matters because reality responds to embodied behavior, not private fantasy. The world may not always be fair, but it is usually responsive to clarity, usefulness, skill, and consistency. Not to performance. Not to wishful thinking. Positive thought matters, but only as fuel. It cannot carry the whole burden. If hope is not connected to concrete steps, it becomes a pleasant hallucination. Writing matters, but only when it drives conduct. The page can clarify, expose, and refine. But it cannot walk for you. Struggle matters because meaningful paths test the person walking them. Resistance is not always a warning. Often it is evidence that you have finally touched something real enough to shape you. Surrender matters because peace begins where responsibility ends. Do everything that is yours to do. Then release the rest without collapsing into passivity or obsession. Values matter because a life built around appearances will eventually betray you. Competence, contribution, connection, and integrity create a deeper kind of abundance, one that does not disappear the moment public attention shifts. And time matters because transformation is slow alchemy. It is the compounding result of clear judgments, disciplined choices, honest reflection, and repeated effort across seasons that may not look impressive at all. It took years to realize this, and maybe you have lived long enough to feel it too. Relaxing and letting go does not mean becoming passive. It means you stop fighting reality with fantasy. It means you stop begging life to reward your feelings and start training yourself to meet life with clarity. It means you do the work, you refine your judgments, you stay aligned with what matters, and then you release your grip on the parts you were never meant to control. That is where attraction becomes real. Not magical. Real. Because the person you become through this process is no longer chaotic, desperate, performative, or easily manipulated. You become more grounded. More useful. More discerning. More difficult to deceive. More capable of recognizing what belongs in your life and what only flatters your hunger. And in a world built on imitation, confusion, and status theater, becoming real is already a kind of power. Thank you for spending this time with StoicCraft. If this spoke to where you are in life, take one idea from this video and apply it today, not someday, not when you feel more ready, but today. And tell me in the comments, where in your life have you been mistaking desire for direction? I would genuinely like to hear your answer. If this kind of deep, practical Stoic reflection is what you need, subscribe and stay with the channel. There is more ahead. And if you are ready to keep going right now, choose the next video on screen and continue the work of becoming calmer, stronger, and harder to shake.